What we're going to be doing is a standard layup today, which consists of what we consider a standard layup, which consists of 2 Flexi-Stretch, 2 nylon stockinette, 2 of our Coyote composite braid. In this layup, you start out depending on what you want your outside finish to be. If I was doing a Caucasian finish or a solid finish socket, I would start with my Flexi-Stretch, then I would go with my composite, then my nylon stockinette, and then 2 more Flexi-Stretch over the outside of this nylon to really get that whited out nice, and then I can put in whatever pigment that I want to use and I will get that color. Today what I'm going to do is just reverse the layups because I want to show what Coyote composite looks like with no pigment and a standard acrylic resin to see what kind of look we get. So we'll start with the 2 Flexi-Stretch, something nice and fine. We'll go the 2 stockinette, the 2 braid. I'll pull a vacuum nylon over it and then a PVA bag. And the only reason why I put the vacuum nylon on last is just makes it slide over, the PVA bag slide over the composite easier. The composite versus, say, a carbon, in my opinion, they both kind of feel the same when you go to pull a PVA bag over it. I think the composite's actually a little smoother than carbon, but they're still both kind of hard to get a PVA bag over. And if you put on a very, very sheer vacuum nylon, it's almost 99% unnoticeable in your finish. You just can't see it, and it makes getting a bag on 1,000 times easier. You don't have near the struggle with it, and tearing a bag, ripping stuff up, it just works a lot nicer. And on the one shot, we've got our tie-off ring in here, so we'll be deflecting everything. All right, so we've got our first layer hanging over the top of this. Pull it down a little ways. I'll take my thread, go around my tie-off ring right here. Okay. And we'll deflect back. And that's what I mean by 2 layers. 1 deflected layer, 2 total layers. Get those down nice and snug. Okay, now, here is something that I notice when I lay up, especially this easy off lock, and that is you can get bridging right through here. And there's a couple of ways of going around this. And on this one here, and I don't always do this, but I sometimes do, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of a little bit of this and make myself an opening right here. I'm going to pull that back away from the face of my tooling and just let that slip right around it. Now, it's not a real critical thing to do, but depending on your layup and how the limb shape looks when you're all done, this can make less buildup on the face of your lever lock tooling. And when you go to sand into it, it's a lot less thick or wide of an edge, and it just looks a lot cleaner when it's finished. The other reason I'm doing this is you start getting bridging in these areas, and that leaves places for air to get trapped when you start laminating. You start pushing into these undercuts and you'll start seeing air come out. It'll push all the resin out, and then your bag or your nylon will try to pull away and you'll get air in behind that. So by doing this, you're getting rid of the deep, deep pockets in there. So on this first one, since it's such a sheer nylon, I'm not going to tie anything off right here. I'm just going to cut that open and let that be exposed. So now we're back down where our bridge is gone. Everything's fitting fairly snug. This is our nylon stockinette. Make sure I got enough of it here. Okay, and we'll tie it off in the ring in the same way. Nylon stockinette is a lot thicker and heavier. We can do the same thing with it. Let's grab a little section of it and just run us a slit down here through the face of this. Take care of some of this waste. Go ahead and push that right around the face of this. Like I said, you don't have to do this, but it does get rid of a lot of that face bulk that just isn't needed. Now, if you've got a limb that's fairly large and you're still getting a fair amount of bridging through here, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and take your thread and find that groove in the top of your lock or somewhere close to it and bring all of that bridging in. Get rid of all that bridge. You stop a lot of pooling and potential for air to get in behind there. Kind of a shot of this area I'm talking about right here, how nice and snug this is around this. Can you see that? The area from the face of this down to my leg, what we've tried to get rid of here is a bridge. And you can also do this without cutting the face of it open like I've done, and just take your string and tie it and help your PVA bag, help your resin, help everything get in there closer and tighter. If I had a limb that was out here like this and you put this lock on top of it, you really start getting this bridge buildup. So just like your tie-off ring here, it gives you a place to tie off your material and deflect. At the same time, you've got a ring down below. It doesn't hurt somewhere in your layup to throw a piece of thread and bring all that lamination in, get it nice and tight. Because the one place you're going to have weight in your socket is always going to be on your distal end, bringing all that resin around all these closely wound layers. So the tighter you can get this, the more resin you get out of here, you just start getting rid of some of the weight in your overall socket. And maybe getting rid of potential problem down the road when you get ready to laminate. So we've got our 2 flex stretch, 2 nylon stock, and let's go with our Coyote composite. Now if this, since we're talking about this tooling piece, if this was going to be a pigmented socket like we talked about before, the Coyote composite's going to be right in the beginning stages of my layup. And I do the same thing with it over that tooling piece. If I have 2 layers of this composite early in my layup, I'll go ahead and take my tool and I'll cut that window open and get rid of this little bit of composite right here. It just draws everything in tighter. Then after it is on and I go to throw my nylons on, I'll leave the nylons alone and just tie them off. I'll leave the nylons on the face and tie everything down. That brings everything in tighter. The only thing I've got left on the face of my tooling is a couple of nylons, and that's it. So it makes it a lot easier to sand away than sanding through 2 layers of this plus all the nylon. If you've ever laid one of these up and sanded one out, it will totally make sense to you when you do this. At this point, which is why these grooves are up here on top, lay in a carbon tape, S-glass tape, whatever you like to use for reinforcement. Right now would be a good time to do this. Come right through here, do a light spray glue, and lay in your S-glass tape or your carbon tape, just like that, to really lock that lock in. That's exactly what those are for. You can take this and kind of curve it in around just like that, and then use your string and tie it back down tight. We'll go back to where we are in our layup. Okay, I'm at the end of my socket right here. That feels good. All right, now we got to find our little groove and deflect this back. There, now you can see it getting into it. There, we're cooking with gas. Okay. So you can see our tooling piece showing up underneath here where we've cut the stockinette and the Flexi-Stretch away. If you wanted to, now would be a good time to cut another slit in that and get rid of some of that braid if you really think you need to. But because I've got rid of the stockinette, 2 layers of the braid over that lock is not, or that tooling piece is not hard to get rid of. It's just nice to get a lot of that bulk out of there. So I guess I would say getting rid of half of it kind of helps. All right. Okay, the shape of this limb is really nice with the lock. If I thought I needed to help that bridging out, I would do my string again. But now that I'm on the outside, my finished area, I really don't want to see a piece of string around there. And as nice and flexible as this is, because we've tied everything else underneath of it in, it's drawing in really easy. So a PVA bag will have no trouble sucking that down tight. Okay, so we've got our 2 flex, we've got our 2 nylon stockinette, and our 2 Coyote composites. We are ready to put our glue plate on. And I'm going to use the compound 4 again. And I'm going to hit every one of my screws right on the threads, just in case. When we first started using the ER resin, the epoxy resin, this was the one place that we really noticed it the most, was using the modified acrylics. I sometimes lubricated my screws, I sometimes didn't, sometimes I'd forget. It really wasn't too bad to get them out. They come out pretty nice. We started using the ER resin, the epoxy, and you forget to lubricate your screws. And every now and then you run into one and you really wished you had. You can get them out, but you might have to warm them up a little bit. It really bonds well to everything. All right, so on this lamination plate, I'm not killing these screws when I'm putting them in. I'm just sucking them down nice and snug, making sure everybody's the same tightness. You don't want to get real carried away anytime you're on top of this lock. The only thing that's holding this thing in alignment is our Coyote composite glue, and theoretically I could grab this thing and crank it and snap it loose. So anytime you're working with it, you still want to be a little careful and not get up here with a wrench, say like this, and grab onto it and starts torquing this thing on there, because you can snap your lock loose. All right, so I got my screws in. I'm going to do one more little step, and that is throw a teeny bit of putty in my heads of my screw, just because I don't like cleaning resin out of those screw heads. That step can save me a couple of minutes. So now I'm all set here. I've got my glue plate on, my lamination plate. I'm going to throw my vacuum nylon over the top, tie everything off, slide my PVA bag on. We'll hit that with some nano resin and see what this thing looks like. Straight resin, no pigment. We'll get to find out exactly what Coyote composite looks like with modified acrylic.